Welcome to the Purpose to Create podcast with Natasha Wright, a business podcast for photographers and creativepreneurs who want to level up as they pursue their purpose to create. Lean in as we connect, inspire, and impact you as you build and grow your business.
I'm so hyped that you're here and listening to today's show. Today's guest is Kanayo Adibe, a Washington, D.C., Maryland, Virginia, and destination wedding and lifestyle photographer. In today's episode, we're chatting about the everyday photographer. Hi, Kanayo. Welcome to the show.
Hey, Natasha. Thanks for having me.
So it's a ton of stuff I left out of your intro because you are a well-accomplished photographer, and I think it's best to hear it from you because you're amazing, and I want it to come from the great Kanayo Adibe. So tell us a little bit about yourself.
Wow. These are I always find these questions really complicated because it's like, how do I really just talk about myself? So for the most part, professionally, well, I'm a photographer who happens to shoot weddings, street photography. I do some commercial work and lifestyle stuff. I'm a proud father of a 3-year-old girl, Adora. She's my world. And I'm also married to her mom.
Okay.
Stephanie. Stephanie and I have been together for over 10 years, we're going to be married for 5 years coming May. So it's great family life, you know. I am originally from Nigeria. I was born in the US, but I grew up in Nigeria and I came to the United States for college. I went to the University of Maryland, Baltimore County, where I studied information systems, so IT. I also have a master's degree from the same place for the same degree to information systems. I've been a photographer for I'm going on 6 years now as a photographer. And yeah, you know, the other accolades and things could be left for someone who really cares. You know, you can search and see what I've accomplished in the photography world, but that's neither here nor there, you know. But yeah, that's me in a nutshell.
That's cool. I like how you downplayed yourself, but it's okay. Everybody just go to Kanayo's website, check him out. He's amazing. He'll tell you more about what he does on his website, so go check it out. But I'm ready to get into today's topic, which is the everyday photographer, because it is not what it sounds like.
Yeah. So ideally, what it is really about approaching photography as an artist versus a business person. Over the years, I have been fortunate enough to share some of my photography knowledge with people. I have taught a workshop. You were an attendee at my workshop.
Yes. Oh, wait a minute. Let's pause right there because your workshop was really life-changing for me in the sense that it helped me to think outside of the box as a photographer. And as a photographer, sometimes we get stuck in limiting and pushing ourselves to think more creatively. And, you know, going to your workshop definitely helped me to look at things a lot differently. So it challenged me and pushed me as a photographer. It's one of the best photography workshops that I've gone to. And then I'm glad that I invested in to help me grow as a photographer. So
thank you. I appreciate that, honestly. Really do. So yeah, I had people over time ask me questions about how to, you know, get better in photography. And, you know, a lot of people spend time doing the research, right? Like go to YouTube, you learn, you go to a workshop, you take notes down. But a lot of times they take those notes down, they put down the notes and go shoot their wedding on Saturday and Sunday, or shoot whatever paid event on, you know, whatever day they shoot that. But they don't live as a photographer. They work as a photographer. So they're not constantly practicing. You know, they say, there's a researcher say it takes 10,000 hours of deliberate practice to become world-class in anything. And, you know, I doubt that if you're only picking up your camera and deliberately practicing on Saturday or Sunday when you're shooting a gig, I don't think you can hit 10,000 hours that easily. And, you know, the way I look at it is, yes, we work Saturdays and Sundays, but you know, photography is an art form first. You know, it is a business now. We've turned our hobbies into businesses, but first it's an art form. And artists live as artists throughout the week. they're thinking about their creations, they're getting inspiration about their creations. As a photographer, I shoot street photography. And, a lot of my development as a photographer happened during my, the fun shooting I'm doing, shooting my family, photographing my daughter, photographing my friends in unique places just for fun because I have a camera on me all the time. When I'm shooting streets and making those images, I am developing my skill sets. I am getting better. So come wedding day, it's like I do this all the time, so the wedding is just another thing to photograph. And it's not the hype, all that tension and pressure of being, oh, you only have 5 minutes to do this. Oh, I haven't, I don't scout locations when I shoot. Like I shoot their sites on scene. And that's because I'm familiar with shooting in places that I've never seen before. I've made portraits in places that I've never seen before. And that's because I just do it all the time and I do it for fun. So when I see elements that I look for, like lighting or textures or interesting lines and stuff for compositions, it's like, I see it all the time elsewhere. So when I'm in a wedding, I don't really have to look for those things. They just reveal themselves to me because I'm used to seeing them. It's almost like the law of attraction. The more you do, the more the world, the universe allows for you to do. So,
right. What would you say feeds your creativity?
Ultimately, majority of my inspiration comes from the environment. The way I photograph, I use basically the places I shoot inform my photographs, my compositions. That's why certain places I might make better pictures in certain places because those places have things that inspire the images I make. And that's why I don't scout and that's why I don't pre-plan because, if I go to a place where the lighting is different, I am not stuck on the original idea I had because the lighting was a certain way at that time. I show up, the lighting is different. I use that light as is to inspire the photograph for that scene. And it's the most freeing thing in the world because it's almost like there's no limits to the kind of photograph I could make.
Yeah.
The photograph essentially makes itself based on what's available. And, it's really freeing. And it also allows my work to be so dynamic because nothing's expected. You can expect quality photographs or you can expect an artistic picture, but you cannot expect a type of picture. Anything is possible based on what we have right in front of us. So that's really where a lot of my inspiration comes from. It's just being able to work with the natural elements in the scene, light, textures, lines. I like minimalist photographs. So anything that just inspires a clean image will inspire a photograph from me.
Yeah. And so I noticed that you say make a photograph versus take a photograph. What's the difference between the two?
So, when you take a photograph, it's almost like you just pick up your picture, your camera and snap. You're not really thinking about the picture you are making. It's almost like a cake, right? Like you physically have to think about your ingredients. You need to think about what the cake is going to look like, how long you're going to put it in the oven. Same thing with a photograph. When I pick up my camera and I identify the things I want to make the image that I want, I literally will pick it up, find the light, find the scene, eliminate things that I don't want in the scene, remove my distractions either by adjusting my composition, usually by adjusting my composition, or if something enters the scene that I don't want, I wait for it to walk out. Then I plug in my couple and pose them. So it's almost like I have my ingredients that I'm adding to this picture to make it the picture that I want it to be, versus forgetting everything else in the scene and just focusing on the couple. And when you take that picture, you end up discovering things that you didn't even know were in the picture. Well, I know everything that's in my picture when I take it because I intentionally want it to be there, because I do a lot of eliminating of distractions in my images. So, I've talked to people who say they see a picture they took a long time ago and they didn't remember they took it. And I'm like, how can you not remember a picture you made? If you literally designed that image before you push the shutter, you will remember it because you literally put it together to make the image. It wasn't something that you snapped by mistake. It's something that you literally put pieces in and took pieces out to form. So there's no way I can forget an image I made. I might forget something I snapped because I wasn't really thinking about it. I was just pushing the shutter and I caught something. But something I made, I remember. Like I remember when we went to Cuba, and I'd only been to Cuba once at the time. And I made photographs in certain places that I'd never seen before or had no idea where they were because I was roaming the streets, walking in random directions. But
Right.
when I went back to Cuba the second time, I was like, I remember this place. This is where I made this picture. This wall was the wall that I made that picture. And that's because it was intentional. Like I remembered the things in that scene that informed the image that I made. And, it was easy for me to like literally walk by a street and remember the street because I remember those things that I used to make those photographs. So that's kind of like how I look at it from the making versus taking images, taking pictures.
And as you were talking, I was just getting ready to say the same thing as far as being intentional about the images that you're making. You not forget it because you're very intentional about the scene that you're setting and the atmosphere that you're creating, whether it's for your couple or whether it's a street scene or whatever. You're very intentional about what you're making. So thanks for clarifying that, because I hear a lot of people talk about it, but nobody has ever really broken it down. I mean, I know what it means, but for people who are listening, it's really good to hear that clarification so people can really understand the difference and really to challenge them to think differently about making photographs.
Yeah. So I was like, it's really about making photographs with intent. And this goes back to that whole everyday photographer thing I was talking about, where if you are able to make pictures of, like say for someone who wants to get better at documentary photography, either shooting weddings with a documentary, from a documentary perspective, not the portraits, but the documentary. Well, if you have a family or you have even a significant other, their life is happening and there's stories happening in their life. So if you carry a camera and you look at that person like you will look at a paying client, and you use the same intention, you start to take photographs of them with the same intent as you would a paying client, you are building that skill set. You are learning things about light and you're learning things about moments and all the other things that go into photography or into documentary photography. And it's some of the best. Not only is it great that you're documenting your own life like that, but you're learning just as intensely as you would if you were on the job.
Right. Are there any type of barriers or anything that you face being a creative, making photographs? Are there any times where you're not inspired or you just don't feel like creating? In those instances, do you still push yourself to create, or do you just kind of take a step back?
I think there's such a thing as burnout, creative burnout. Sometimes I remember, like, I think this past winter, I was kind of like in a funky mood because I didn't feel like shooting. I didn't pick up my camera at all. And what I realized was the weather kind of was so gloomy that, like now that the sun is out, unfortunately we can't go out because we're on lockdown. But now that the sun is out, I feel like going out to make pictures. But I remember when it was getting dark at like 4:00 or 3:00 or whatever. Like I was like, why do I feel so uninspired? And I realized that it was really about the fact that the environment did not call for photography. It didn't inspire anything,
right?
And I think sometimes it's okay to just do something else for a second. If photography is not really working as far as you don't feel inspired, you don't feel like making pictures, maybe if you do something else that could inspire, go watch movies, go watch something else could inspire your photography or make you want to go shoot. Like for me, it was the weather changed, and now I'm like, I want to go, I want to shoot, and prior to the lockdown, I did do a little bit of shooting, but yeah, I think every now and then you get in the funk. Some people, it might not even be weather inspired. It's like, oh, I've been shooting weddings, I'm just so tired and I just don't feel like doing it. Well, shoot something different. I used to use street photography as a palate cleanser for me. Like I would shoot weddings and be frustrated, like, oh, it's just the same mundane thing. I'm doing this over and over again. Then I go shoot street, and it's like I cleanse my palate, and I'm ready again. I'm re-inspired to go document weddings and bring my, actually artistic perspective, portrait perspective into the work and all that. So I think it's normal to have burnout, but like one of the best advice I could give is to either shoot, if it's genre burnout, shoot something else. If you're tired of shooting weddings, try shooting street. Or if you're tired of shooting streets, try do portraits, something. If photography as a whole is kind of like just annoying, well, try another hobby. It might re-inspire you to go back there and shoot. I have a friend who, I know I'm a little bit long-winded, but I had a friend who...
It's okay. We have nothing but time. Where are we?
I have a friend who kind of got irritated with wedding photography, and he started doing other hobbies like motorbiking. He ride his motorcycle. He got a motorcycle, started riding it, got gear, and like got really good at riding motorcycles. Then he would bike, mountain biking. Then he started like rock climbing. But what was interesting is, while he got tired of photography and he was doing all these other things, he was taking pictures of those things that he was doing. So those new activities were re-inspiring his photography. Like now he has content from him on mountains and stuff, and that he might blog one day, but it's not related to weddings anymore. It's still feeding his photography in some shape or form. So I think as photographers, we're gifted in that sense where we have this tool. We're able to document life. And if it's not shooting the things you shoot one day, on Friday and Saturday or whatever, shooting your gigs, you can still find a way to plug it into something else and still have that ability and that gift to be able to document life, your life, and the lives of the people around you in a really special way versus, just a cell phone picture. So there's always a reason to make pictures, especially if it's just on that hobby level.
Right, exactly. I mean, as a photographer, we're always evolving.
Right.
We're always evolving, unless you're not, and then that's on you. But there's always opportunity for you to take it to the next level. I want to talk a little bit more about the everyday photographer, because it's more than just a Saturday and Sunday thing. But then what is the mindset of the everyday photographer, right? I feel like we all should be an everyday photographer, but we just don't have the mindset to. And then I know that you are a street photographer too, and we'll talk a little bit more about that, because I really love hearing you talk about that. But what are some other things that the everyday photographer needs to have?
So I think for one, I think you have to have the passion of, an artist, photography as an artist, as a hobby, not as a source of income. Like the passion, because I think the motivations are different. Photographers who want to get better at their craft are artists. I think that's the artist mentality. I want to get better at my craft. Now, you have to love the process of making pictures. It's not about, okay, if I get better because social media thinks I'm better, I'll book more work. Like that shouldn't be the motivation. The motivation should be, I want to be a great photographer. I want to be a great image maker. And once you have that mindset, it's very powerful. Like it's the motivation that will push you out there to get that everyday camera that you take everywhere with you. Have you shoot things that are not necessarily interesting to anyone else, but just interesting to you. Keep you thinking about photography. And, like I remember in my earlier days, like I was so obsessed with being so good that I would be driving on the street. I'd be driving down on the highway or in back roads, and I'd look, I'd be like, wow, that'd be a great place to take so kind of picture. Oh, wow, I could just put a couple right there and do this and that. Like I would be seeing pictures everywhere and seeing lights and be like, oh man, like, and we'll go on vacation and I'll literally turn my wife into a model. I'm like, we're going on vacation, but I need you to stand here because I need to make this picture. I need you to stand there. I need to make this picture. And sometimes it'll just be straight up documentary. We're walking. I was so consumed by it. Like all I wanted to do was make images and blog them and tell stories. And I wasn't getting paid for any of that. But I think that fueled me more as a creative than I was more excited about doing that than actually shooting a paid gig. And that's, I think, how my skill set got so good so fast, because while people are either practicing on their wedding day or the occasional workshop they go to, I am practicing every single day with things that are non-paid and things that are my personal things, but were exciting enough to keep me inspired and keep me going, keep me learning. So I just feel like photographers need to remember that they are photographers first, and they're photographers first, but they choose, or they're not necessarily wedding photographers or portrait photographers. They are photographers who choose to shoot weddings or portraits for income.
Yeah.
Like, that's the mentality to have about it. And that's how, if you think about it that way and you approach it that way, you will become good. Like, there's no way you will be better.
And we sometimes get stuck on the title of a thing, right? Like a wedding photographer. Like, you're just you're a photographer, not just a photographer. And sometimes so put up on, I'm a wedding photographer, family photographer, portrait photographer, lifestyle, all these things. But you're always, the root of that is a photographer first.
Right.
Sometimes we lose sight of that.
Exactly. When people say, I am a portrait photographer, or they tend to like fall into put themselves in a box, is because they don't know how to do the other stuff. And they're afraid to do the other stuff because, let's dive into that whole natural light photographer versus on camera. People use flash, people who don't use flash.
Video, yeah.
Right. So I am a natural light photographer because I don't know how to use flash. Right. That's what essentially to me what that says. So let me put myself in this box because I am afraid to try to do that other thing. Now, I consider myself an available light photographer, meaning I don't care what the light is. Natural, a blend of natural and artificial, off-camera lighting, whatever. I believe I can do everything. Now, the way I approach that is I show up, and whatever this calls for, or whatever the image I'm trying to make calls for, I would make that image using that light source. I don't limit myself to natural light. Now, for creative reasons, I might say, okay, I'm going to limit myself to the available light, because not all light is natural. So like if we're outdoors, I'm just going to use the available light because that can inspire an image, a certain type of image. If I'm indoors, I could say, I'm not going to use my on-camera light. I'm going to use whatever light sources that are available in that space, because that can inspire a certain kind of image, because limitations inspire stuff. That's actually one of the best ways to get better at certain things, is putting yourself in a box, in a sense, right? Because, like, for instance, when they say shoot, when we advise people to shoot primes, because primes actually make you a little bit more creative. When you have limitations, you find creative ways to solve problems. So, for instance, I remember when I first started shooting, I had a crop body and I had a 50 millimeter lens on a crop body. And I thought it was a 50 because I didn't know any better. But I found out it was an 85. And I shot an event with that lens, thinking I was shooting a 50. But because I was so limited to an 85 perspective, I'm shooting group shots. I mean, most events are like, everybody, hey, stand, let's take pictures. I'm shooting group shots, and I'm like with 85 in a room, in a closed room. So I'm laying on the floor, going up, trying to get. But it got the wheels turning because I had this limitation of what I could do, but I had bigger things that I needed to do. So because of that limitation, it made me think creatively about how to solve my problem. And because I was thinking creatively, it got those creative. I mean, really, that's where creativity comes from, is needing to solve complex problems because you have limitations. And while I would never do that again, because I know better, but what that did it helped me think about, understand perspective, getting higher, getting lower, how that could allow me to see more and stuff. And now I know the right lenses to use. I still won't use a prime. I mean, I still won't use a zoom lens because we tend to, rather than move forward or move back, we tend to zoom in and zoom out, and that is stifling in a sense creatively.
It makes photographers lazy. It makes it
lazy. And one of the cool things is, say you had, the cool thing about the prime thing versus the zoom lens thing is, if you couldn't make a picture because you were too close, you would zoom out, right, with the zoom lens. But if you couldn't make a picture because you were too close with a prime, you would think about a creative solution. And that's where creative images come from, is that limitation that inspires a creative solution. So you come up with an interesting composition because you couldn't just take the easy shot because you were too close. Maybe to make you move back a little bit and you create something different versus just zooming out to a wide angle and it's like the same image, just wider. So that's where a lot of that creative stuff comes from, is those limitations. But with lights, I feel like you could make the choice to limit yourself with lights, but don't be limited to light, a certain type of light source, because you don't know how to do the other alternative. Yeah. So
I don't know. You tend to use that as a crutch.
Yeah, it's a crutch. And then again, this goes back to what we originally said. I went on a wild tangent, but the genre. I am a portrait photographer because I am uncomfortable shooting the other types of things. I am a documentary only photographer because I'm not really good at portraits, so I just push the part that I'm really good at, right? But I feel like I am a way better documentary photographer than I once was. I started off as a portrait-heavy, creative portrait photographer, wedding photographer, because I sold what I was better at, the portraits, and what I loved, the portraits. But guess what? When I started shooting street photography and I got really good at documentary photography, guess what I love now? Documentary photography. I love documentary because I am good at it now. So a lot of the things we don't like is because we're not good at it. If you're good at something, you will like it. And the reason you like it is because you're good at it. Like, that's just simply how these things work. So, the idea is, for me, wedding photographers, in my personal opinion, are generally, the really good wedding photographers are generally the best photographers overall, in my opinion, because we have some of the best skill sets as it pertains to the different genres of photography. Like, if you look at really good wedding photography, there's really good portraiture, right? There's really good fashion in it. There's really good product photography. There's really good food photography.
Yep.
There's really good architectural photography. There's really good landscape photography. There's really good documentary photography, all in it, in one genre. So it's one of those things where you have to be, good at least proficient in all those different genres to be one good wedding photographer, versus a beauty photographer just needs to know how to do beauty stuff.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But you look at, I'm going to drop names. You look at someone like Stan Lowe, right? He brings his beauty. He's a really good beauty photographer. We know that. But he brings that into his weddings. And you can see it in his weddings. You can see how his wedding portraits would differ from the other person because he's bringing his beauty element into it, right? I consider myself a good street photographer, and I do artistic portraits pretty well. You see those two things. You see the street photography in my documentary photography, in my weddings. You see the artistic portrait that I could do with anybody, anywhere in my wedding. And I also think I do decent landscape. So you see those little things, all those things in there. And, a lot of the best photographers I know shoot other things. They shoot street. They at least the documentary ones, they shoot street. GD, I like to shoot street. Kurt Bob shoots street. Josh shoots street when he has the time because he's so busy. Chris Thomas, like everybody I know, Ashley Bing, they all shoot street, and you see how the street photography informs their weddings and vice versa. So yeah, like you just have to, like I'll drop another name, Ashley, for instance. Like Ashley Bing, for those who don't know the full name, she I remember when we were in Cuba, she started to shoot streets. Like she got into street photography. And we're in all of us, during Mystic, we're in Cuba, and I went shooting. Both of us went out together and we shot, and like I just saw the images, and I was like, oh my god, like I didn't know how good a photographer you were, and because I'm shooting the same thing, that's another thing. It's like when you're there and you see what it looked like, and you're both shooting over each other's shoulders or against each other, whatever the case, and you see the image somebody else makes, and you're like, damn, like you pulled that out of this, like that is amazing. You know what I mean? And one thing I noticed about her is Ashley is always taking pictures. It's actually annoying, actually, how often
more than you.
Like, so for me, I might be home and okay, I have my kid running around and I might take a few pictures of her. And when I shoot street, I go out to shoot street. Ashley is always taking pictures. She uses her cell phone a lot. Like she might intentionally go out and shoot street, but like just on a daily basis, she's always taking pictures. Just always, like with her phone, she's always like she take a picture of it. And it's like I'm looking like, what are you taking a picture of? You know, but she's always taking pictures of something, and I'm like, wow, you take a lot of pictures. And what if you look at her work today, you see you see that she's a beast. Like especially with the documentary thing, she's a beast. It wasn't always a beast, but today she's a freaking beast. You know, and it's all, and that's just the proof. You can tell the how aggressive you are with wanting to make pictures will translate eventually. Like she got really aggressive with it, and you know, I'm like after we did Mystic, then we did the cookout, and she was shooting us. I saw the pictures. I was like, man, that's when I was like, yeah, you're legit. You know, like
you're legit. A dope street photographer.
Yeah, she's legit. Like she's legit. So. And that's the same mentality. Like if everyone thought that way and was that aggressive with it, it will be great. You know, it's like that's 10,000 hours of deliberate practice.
And the crazy thing is, she used what she had. She just used her cell phone.
Mm-hmm.
She shoots with her cell phone all the time. In addition to her camera that she has for street photography.
Yeah, the Fuji camera. Yeah,
used what she had. It was like not a barrier to being creative. And I think
a camera is a camera.
Yeah, that's it.
It's a camera.
The camera that you have available.
Yeah, the best camera is the one you have on you. And, you know, while there might be limitations from camera to camera, at the end of the day, if you're making pictures, you are making pictures. You're taking pictures, and that's all that matters. You know, like you're making pictures. You're like training your brain. You know, it comes to the point where those things that used to be so complicated to understand or just to see, like people are like, oh, how did you see that? I'm like, I saw it because I saw it. I've seen it 10,000 times before. Right. So when I show up here, I see it again because I saw it yesterday. You know, it's not new. Nothing is new under the sun. It's a different space, a different texture on the wall, a different texture on the ground, but it's the same picture I made. I've made this picture 10 times with different people in it at different locations, but it's the same picture. You know, so, you know, there's nothing new under the sun. And it's just that repetition or being able to identify, like I walk into a room and I know it's symmetrical automatically because I know I look for symmetry. That's something I look for in all my pictures. So if I show up, I'm like, okay, symmetrical space. Automatically, I see it without looking for it, you know, or I see a lot of highlights and shadows now because I do a lot of hard lighting. So if I walk into a room, I can see the sun shining on the floor. And I'm like, okay, this is a nice, hard lights spot here. I can create huge contrast with shadows and light here automatically. I see light patterns on the wall. I see interesting textures on the wall. I see, you know, leading lines, all that stuff. I see it without looking for it because I've seen it 10,000 times.
Right. Does it matter what kind of camera you use?
No, it doesn't. It doesn't really matter what camera you use, right? Like you can make pictures with anything. I've made nice pictures on my iPhone. I've made nice pictures on my Leica. I've made nice pictures on my Nikon. I feel like you just need to identify with the camera that works with you, or works for you. For me, certain cameras can change how you shoot or how you approach your shooting. I'm not into mirrorless as much because as someone who shoots documentary and likes to do a lot of sequencing with my shots, shoot a lot of images quickly, and I need that fast response. My experience with mirrorless, I don't feel like they're as responsive as I need them to be for the kind of shooting that I do as a documentary when I'm, wearing my documentary wedding photographer hat. I need that quick response and reliability. When I shot with like Fuji's not too long ago, I'll hit shots and like, it might take this one, it might not take that one. If I turn the camera on, I had to wait a little bit for it to, so I don't have that quick response. So I don't presently, some people might say, oh yeah, Sony's are great, blah, blah. I haven't experienced it and I'm not willing to experiment right now. I love my Nikon D780. It's the best camera I've ever owned. I get mirrorless features in it as well as DSLR features. It has both. When you go into live view, it literally becomes like a mirrorless camera. So you get all the eye focus and all those things that people who use mirrorless love. You can see your exposure, but when I want a DSLR, I switch back into optical viewfinder and I get that quick DSLR response that I want. So at the end of the day, it doesn't matter, man. I've seen people make amazing pictures with bullshit cameras, excuse my French. But, you know, for me, you just need to like what you have, right? And be comfortable with what you have. And you'll be able to make whatever images you want to make.
And then to add to that, not just like it, but you just really need to know how to use your camera.
Yes. You got to understand it. Like, you got to understand it, man. It's a tool at the end of the day. And the more familiar you are with your tool, the more you can make the kind of photographs you want to make, you know? So like with my Leica, you know, it slows me. It's a different kind of camera. It's a rangefinder and it's all manual focus and all manual controls. So it changes how I shoot. It slows me down. I'm more deliberate with the images I make. I manual focus everything, you know. So it's a different experience and it might be an enjoyable one and it might inspire you to shoot more because you enjoy that experience.
Right.
So that's how these things work. It's like, you know, so for me, when I got my Leica, I became more of a street photographer because I enjoyed the experience of using the camera. So I went out and I flew all the way to Cuba just so I could shoot. So I spent 3 days in Cuba, or 3 or 4 days in Cuba by myself, shooting all day for 3-4 days. You know, so things like that can inspire, because you enjoy that experience. It inspires you to go shoot. If you like sports cars and you buy a sports car, you're going to probably be on the road a lot more because you enjoy the experience of driving versus someone who just drives a car to commute point A to point B. Driving a car might be an experience that you enjoy. So you're out there in that car a lot more and you appreciate that car a lot more. And that's kind of like the difference with, you know, the tools that we use. Is sometimes the tool is exciting and enjoyable, that it inspires you to go out and use it, you know, and that's kind of like where I think how you should kind of pick the tools you use.
I appreciate that because I hear a lot where photographers feel like the camera is what makes them a better photographer. And part of it is true, but it's not entirely true. But thank you for that. I really appreciate that insight on that, because it's really important to really hear that, right? Like you hear a lot of chatter and things like that, but above the noise, it's just not true. You need to like the camera you have and really know how to use it.
Yeah, it's really about that.
Yeah. And so before we wrap up, we talked about it a little bit, but I want to dig a little bit deeper into you're a street photographer. You're a dope street photographer. So I want to learn a little bit more about how did you get into street photography and kind of where do you see yourself going with it?
I think I got into street photography before I got into wedding photography. I got my first camera and I think it was in 2014. You know, it was a Christmas gift, I think, over the 13th. So January 2014, essentially, is when I started using the camera. And I lived in Baltimore City at the time, and I didn't have models around to practice. I didn't have, you know, so I used to do a lot of street portraits and of myself or self-portraits while on the street, just because I was trying out techniques and stuff. And I do like this, everybody does the long exposure street lights pictures and stuff like that, or, you know, car lights on the street pictures. Then eventually I started walking into like Baltimore Harbor and places and just taking random pictures of strangers because the streets are always posing. There are always people there, you know. So I started doing that because I had no other subjects. There were always people on the street. So I took pictures of people, random people. But I did not understand. So I was taking pictures then because I didn't understand what I was doing. I would see a person, I'll take a picture of them randomly. I'll see people doing stuff, take a picture of them randomly. But it wasn't until a lot later where I started to make street photographs because I had an idea. Like literally I would go out and be in a place, see a spot I like and envision what I want that image to look like after the fact. And we'll wait for those things to kind of fall into place. And that's literally a technique of shooting street is the sequencing, and I think call it fishing, where you find the scene, you find your frame, and you wait, and you wait for whatever you want to happen. And one thing is, like I talked about the law of attraction, is I feel like the universe is a really weird place because there are a lot of pictures that get made where you pre-envision it and the universe makes those things happen. It might take you 30 minutes in the same spot, it might take you an hour, but eventually someone that looks how you want them to look, wearing what you want them to wear, might actually walk into your picture and help you make that picture that you envision. It's really amazing. And sometimes it's a reaction picture too. Or sometimes you have no idea. You just want something cool to happen and it happens. But you know, it wasn't till later in my career, after shooting more weddings and wanting to cleanse my palate, I got a Fuji. Fuji made me get out on the street. I shot that a little bit, but I originally wanted a Leica. I couldn't afford a Leica, so I bought a Fuji. But every time I'd hold my Fuji, I'd looking at it like with a Leica sign on it in my head. Like I wanted it to be a Leica, but but I didn't want to pay for it. So eventually, one of the photographs I took on the street was picked up by Nordstrom for their store. So that commercial deal got me enough money to afford a Leica. So I was like, you know what? I made a street photo that generated enough money. So it's kind of like, okay, you know what? Street has created a different income stream. Let me use this money to reinvest back into street and get me a Leica now. And now a lot of streets, like I'm getting a lot more commercial work based off of my street photography. It's a whole new income stream now. It's weird because you're asking where I see it going. I have done a few exhibitions in DC. There are a few galleries that picked up my work. I've done galleries. I have participated in a whole bunch of conferences and stuff. And I've done workshops where my photo work is street photography based because people are starting to understand how it could relate back into weddings. But I think the best part of the streets photography that I've done is the fact that it's opened commercial doors. So I have a separate Instagram page dedicated to street photography with almost the same amount of, actually it's more following on that than I do my wedding page, which I started probably 4 years before that page. But in a year, I caught up and exceeded my wedding following on my street photography page. And that's just opened a lot of doors for commercial work. And I'm really excited about that because I think at the end of the day, I want to do more commercial work than anything else because it's really where the money is. One image alone could get you 3 weddings. You know what I mean? Like the price of 3 weddings, and they use only one image. So it just depends on the licensing and the usage, how they plan to use your image. Essentially, I want to kind of finish off my career in the commercial world, photography. And I'll still do weddings. They're fun every now and then, but I really think that I want to live in the commercial space as a commercial photographer, or a combination of both.
Right. I totally can see you in that space too. I mean, it's a natural fit for you.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like it's a no-brainer.
Yeah.
It's a no-brainer. So thanks for coming through and being on the podcast. I'm so excited that you blessed me with your presence to be on the show.
Oh, thanks for having me.
Oh, you're welcome. Tell us how we can stay connected to you after the show.
So, there are 3 places, I guess. So the first one is you can follow me on Instagram, Kanayo _Adibe for my wedding and my wedding page, wedding photography / commission work page, Project Asphalt, one word, for street photography. And you can also follow me on Patreon. You can just search for me, Kanayo Adibe, on Patreon. And Patreon is my photography education community that I kind of started up, where I share my knowledge about photography. I do critiques on images. I have videos, educational videos, and more content. But I do a lot of writing because I'm finding that it's a great place for me to dump all the stuff that's in my head. Because there are a lot of videos you see out there, and it's like a quick video on how to do something, like how to make this picture or how to make that picture. But what I try to do with the people who patronize me on Patreon is share the truth. You know what I mean? It's like, this is what's in my head. This is how I did things to get to the place that I'm at today. So this is how I think about it. This is how I approach it. This is how I envision things. And from the feedback I'm getting is people are really appreciating the content I'm providing, because it's not just a step on how to this is how I like. No, it's about perspective,
Yeah.
and you finding a way to do your way. I'm not teaching you how to be me and copy my style. It's about how do you become the photographer you want to be? Because when I started, I really wanted to be the best photographer in the world. Now, I have not achieved that by any means. I'm falling way short of that, right? But I feel like I found my own voice. I found my own style. I found my own vision. And now, I'm not the guy who, when I'm about to go shoot something, I go on Pinterest or I go to somebody's site and I look at pictures for inspiration. I don't do that. Like I go there and I'm like, I'm going to go there and I'm going to do what I want to do, because what I want to do is great. It's good enough. And it's me and it's authentic and it's my voice and I'm inspired by my work. You know what I mean? So those are the things I try to drop. I try to drop that kind of perspective on how you develop yourself into being the person you want to be and having your own unique voice and your own unique ideas and enjoying yourself as an artist and not an imitator.
Patreon. That's where to find all this amazing gems that he's dropping times 10. So definitely go to Patreon. I appreciate it. Thanks for coming through.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for listening to the Purpose to Create podcast. Share, like, comment, or review this episode. Check out the show notes at www.purposetocreatepodcast.com and connect with us online at Purpose to Create.